The purpose of this video is to show how easy it is to import data into Planet Together, custom data into Planet Together from an Excel template that we provide. So the best use cases for this are when giving a demo of Planet Together, you want to get custom data into Planet Together to demo to a prospect, or simply when starting a project with a prospect if you want to load their data in quickly and kind of start with a backbone of file formats. You can use this Excel template as well. The basic idea is that you're filling in data into an Excel template. We pull the data into SQL Server. We do some data manipulation of that data of the file, and then we pull that data into Planet Together. So that's behind the scenes. That's what's happening. But to the user, to the demoer, you're really just hitting the refresh button. That whole process happens. So we'll take a look at that. So what are the files included in this package for you to hook up? Got a couple. So one is just the scenario file that will be in sync with the template data file that I'm going to provide. So we'll look at that in a second. Second is a mappings file. This controls the mappings. You guys have used this before, but this controls the mappings from Planet Together to SQL. So I'll show you where that goes. We have a backup of the SQL database for this. So we'll take a look at that in a second. And then, of course, the Excel file. Now, I've got two files here. One's going to be blank that we're going to work with today. One's going to have data in it. We'll take a kind of a look through there in a second. So let's just look quickly on how to hook up the files first, and then we'll dive into the files. So in the database, jump over to SQL for a second. So the database I'm going to give you has got some stored procedures that you're going to run. The main one you're going to run is PT import procedures. If I just take a look at this one calls the other ones, and we have to pass a file path to this procedure. Best way to hook that up is in your instance manager for Planet Together. If we open up the instance, the data source, we're going to execute PT import procedures, and we're just going to pass the file path of that file. In this case, it's on my desktop in a folder, and that's what we're going to use. All right. So when you run Planet Together and run the refresh on Planet Together, it's going to call this procedure. It's going to pass this file path. It's going to do all the work. It's going to pull the data into Planet Together. All right. So quickly, though, let's take a look at just where the other files go. So this other interface file, if you don't know, it goes in the Planet Together folders structure. So we go to our instance. In the integration files folder, you'll see an XML, and that's where that resides. Okay, so like I said, you'll also get a scenario file. When you open up Planet Together with that scenario file, and I'll actually open up the Excel template with the data that we'll walk through in a second. But when you open up Planet Together with that scenario file, it's going to be in sync with this Excel data. And so you're going to see a bunch of jobs, a bunch of resources. Everything's kind of hooked up for you already. This is in sync with the file you'll get. So you'll notice the resources in my file, Mixpack CNC QA finishing. If I go over to Planet Together, Mixpack CNC QA finishing, right? So hopefully it gives you an idea of a backbone and kind of just some example data you can use and modify. For today, though, we are going to start with a blank file and load data into it so you can see how it all works. All right, so in Planet Together, I'm just going to go and clear my scenario data. Let's go up to settings and clear scenario data. I'm going to clear my plants out, capabilities, just all this stuff that I don't really need in here. I'll keep my capacity intervals around. I think that's good. So delete that. Now when I come back to the front here, got nothing in there. Nothing on the Gantt, no jobs, no templates, no orders. We'll come back to our Excel file. I'm going to close this one down. This one has the data in it. We're going to go to an empty one and play around. So, all right, here we go. So let's step through just quickly what the what these tabs mean. So first of all, the first tab is just a color picker. There's a lot of areas in Plan It Together where you can put color names, and I just provided just a list of colors so you can quickly pick something to make an impression during a demo. Metadata, this is really your plant name. So I typically name this the customer name, but you can just call it demo for now. That creates a warehouse called demo and a plant called demo. So whatever you put there, that's what'll happen. I should mention also in this file that all the red columns are required columns for that tab. Doesn't mean every tab here is necessary, but when you're in the tab, make sure you've got those columns filled in. So what we're going to do here, the scenario is we're just going to do some simple resources and jobs, just so you can get a feel for this. So for the first thing, we're going to do, and because we have tanks in Plan It Together and tanks are supported by the spreadsheet, I'm going to make kind of 2 work center areas. Okay, we're going to do like a processing work center area. So actually I'll call it like mix pack. That's what we'll do. Mix pack. Mix pack. And we'll have a mixer. So mixer 1 and pack line 1. All right. The capability of the mixer is mix. Capability of the packing line is pack. We're going to call the mixing a tank resource. All right. Infinite capacity, if I put a 1 in there, meaning true, it's just going to make that resource infinite. In this case, I don't want that. And then a sort ID. I can manage the way these are sorted and Plan It Together by putting an ID. So there's our mix pack resources. And then we're just going to go do like a job shop sort of area. So we'll have some CNCs, CNC 1, 2, 3. Let's do a QA resource, and let's do a assembly area. All right, so all these are in this work center. That's just a category. It's like a department, and really what matters is the capability. So QA and assembly. All right, none of those are tanks, and we can sort these too. 10. 11. It's just gonna do that. All right. Now sort ID is not required. It'll do its own sorting, but just want to control it for now. Product rules, resource product rules we're going to come back to, but that's where you can assign an item, a specific run rate for an item on a resource. So resources, items really are next. So let's do a finished good 1 item. We'll do an intermediate 1 item for our mix pack. For our other areas, we'll do a finished good 2, a couple subs. So let's say sub 1 and sub 2. And let's move these down. Let's do like a raw material and another raw material down there. So I'm just going to copy over the names for the descriptions. Unit of measure. Let's do pounds here. Pounds, sure. Each. Again, this is not required, but it's nice for demos. Pounds are good. Now, this is a required field, so you have to mark off which items are make items. So our finished good, our intermediates are make, our raws are not. This accepts 1s or 0s for true or false. Cost, not a required column, but I can stick values in here. Lead times for the raws, might as well put them in. 5 days for one, 4 days for another. Batch sizes. So when Plan It Together generates MRP, it can generate production orders, to satisfy demand in batch sizes. So you're more than welcome to add in batch sizes for anything that MRP will be generating. So for example, batch size, say a batch size is 100 and I have a demand for 50, it's always going to make a job for 100. If the batch size is 100 and I have a demand for 150, it's going to make 200, right? Kind of increments of that batch size. Max number of batches, you really want to kind of make higher than the known number of batches you're going to need. Sometimes you might do this another way, where your batch size could be 1 and your max number of batches could be 1,000, and that way it'll, if you have a demand for 200, it'll make 200. If you have a demand for 300, make 300. If you have a demand for 1,500, it'll have to make 2 jobs to satisfy that, because one job can only go up to 1,000, essentially. Right? Not going to mess with batches right now. So on-hand quantities, we can put some on-hands in for the raws. Now, because we have a tank item, we know this intermediate item is going to run in the mixer. We need to store it in a tank. That's all that flag does. For the other ones, we don't really care about too much. Item color, again, you could put colors in here to designate different items. So what I'm just going to do is pick a couple items, colors, paste them in here, get rid of the extra ones. And let's see, this one we don't need. And so anyway, when those items come in, they'll have these colors. All right, so resources, items, routings, next really important one, right? So let's come over to our items. I'm just going to copy them, paste them over here. We don't need the raws, right? And they're not make items. So let's just do one operation step for our finished good and our intermediate there. Our finished good here is actually going to have 2. Actually, let's do one operation step for a finished good. Let's do 2 operations for our subs. So 10, 20, 10, 20. Sub 1, sub 2. Description's not required. Just leave that blank for now. So this is going to be pack, right? This is going to be mix. Our finished 2, assembly. This is going to be CNC. This is going to be QA, right? All right. Default resources. So what you could do here is, if you know that sub 1 always runs on what do we have here? CNC, 3 CNCs. If you know it always runs on CNC 3, you can specify a resource for it to run on, and it will always run on CNC 3. Anyway, up to you. But it's good to show. A lot of customers sometimes request, this thing always runs on this one resource. Can we force it to go there? That's how you do that. All right. Other columns required here are run rates. So standard quantity per hour. Let's put 100. Make it simple. 100 for both of these. I'm just going to do 100 all the way down. Now, what's cool here is, if, like a QA step, sometimes, say I'm making 100 pieces, I really want the QA like one of them, just to make sure it's okay, right? So we know it's not going to take a certain run rate to do that QA step. It's kind of more of a fixed time, all right? So in here, you can set a fixed run hours. And so you say QA steps always take an hour to run, that sort of thing. You can also set in a standard setup time. We're going to use attributes later to calculate setup, so I'm going to skip that for now. Okay, let's copy our routings. Let's go to bombs and stick them in here. So finished good 1, we know is going to consume our intermediate, right? Let's say it's a 1-to-1 here. Remember, our templates, our routings and our bombs are all based on a standard quantity of 1, right? Intermediate's going to consume some raw 1. Let's say it's a fractional unit. That's pretty easy. So our finished good, now this is cool. Our finished good is going to actually require 2 subs, right? It's going to require sub 1, it's going to require sub 2, and our subs won't require anything on op 20, but they will require raw 2, raw. They'll both require some raw. All right, so it's going to require 1 sub of 2. The raws, let's just say it doubles it up. Now, this column is interesting. You can say that the amount requires always as a fixed quantity. So say my sales orders for 1,000 finished good 2s. You could say, doesn't matter how many of those I need. I always just need like one sub 1, or one package. Like one box or something. It doesn't matter how many I'm making, they don't fit in the same box, only need one. So let's make one of these raw 2s. We'll just make it a fixed quantity of, we'll make it 100. All right. Okay, so there's our bombs. We got our resources, our items, our routings, our bombs. Everything else here, I'm just going to leave blank for now. I'm just going to make sure my headers are there. But and so we'll come back to this in a bit. Let's run an import and just kind of see what this looks like. Okay, so I close the file. I need to close the file, save it, and we'll come to Plan It Together, and I'll run a refresh. So now this is pulling the data into SQL, doing some transcription of that data, and importing it into Plan It Together. So there we go, refresh started. Okay, so Mixer 1 pack, here's our resources that we sent in. And remember, we named our plant demo, so it's showing up there. And then we sent in some standard routings, right? So we got a finished good item, an intermediate item, sub item. Now remember, we called our mixer a tank, so if we just double check that, let's see, capacity, it is marked as a tank resource, so that's great. All right, so let's go back to our file, and we'll continue. Okay, so our next piece really is our sales order. We need some demand for this item. We're going to play around with how Plan It Together can create production orders first and just check that out. So sales order 1, item name is finished good 1. Let's make 1,000 units. Let's say it's May 10th. Customer name is Walmart. And remember, these fields are not required. Is hot is a way for you to give priority to these jobs if you wanted to. It outlines them in red. Let's make we'll make our next finished good a hot order. Sales order color, again, I could pick a color. I don't have to. Pre-create work orders, we're going to play around with that in a second. So sales order 2 now. Let's do finished good 2. Let's make another 1,000 units of finished good 2. I'm just going to keep the same customer. And we'll make this one hot. And what we're going to do with this one is we're actually going to pre-create the work orders for this. So what does that mean? On the first one, it's finished good 1, I'm not going to pre-create my work orders, meaning in Plan It Together, we're going to actually run MRP and generate jobs to satisfy this order. Whereas this one, I'm going to have SQL do some work for me and pre-create the work orders for me. Now, the only reason you'd want to do this is really in a demo. Your customer gave you some demand. You know in their ERP system, they're going to be pre-creating production orders anyway. So you can demo the system based on like, oh yeah, these are the production orders you gave me. It's just simpler to check this box, make it a 1, than to go try to figure out what all those production orders are going to be and create a demo off of that. So try to save you some time by doing that for you. I'll show you how that works. So let's save this. And remember, our sales order 1 is our mix pack, not pre-creating. Sales order 2, we're going to pre-create some orders. Let's refresh our data here. So we should see a couple sales orders pop in here. Okay, so if we take a look at this, we've got 1 sales order, no pegged production. Second sales order, we're actually pegging production. Plan It Together created some orders for us. So let's look at our jobs, right? So our jobs, notice, finished good 1, 2, sub 1, sub 2. Those were for our sales order 2. Okay, so Plan It Together in our integration, it pre-created these work orders, 1, 2, 3. All right, now what I could do, I don't have to run MRP, right? I can just optimize and Plan It Together will schedule those orders. Now notice, it's kind of cool, they are hot, so they're circled in red for you. And you can add optimization priority to those as well. All right, notice CNC to QA. QA, what did we say? QA runs for 1 hour, so it's running for 1 hour. So that's why it's kind of tiny. And our second CNC, QA, and then both of these feed into into the packaging operation step. Okay? Now, for our tank job, we did not import any orders, so I'm going to run MRP and just show you what that looks like. So what we should see is, we should see an intermediate job get generated and a finished good 1 job get generated for this order. And up here someplace, right? So let's do that. Okay, great. So now we have a finished good order, finished good production order, and an intermediate production order, just like we said. They're up here on the mixer and the pack, and they look like tanks, right? If I move the packaging out, it moves the tank job out. If I move the tank out, it kind of shortens it all up, keeps everything in sync. Okay, so you can read more about tanks on our website and how those work, but this looks like it's working pretty well for us right now. All right, so that's the basic data needed for planning together. One other nuance about this sheet is if your prospect gives you, let's kind of go over to the far right here, if they give you their actual production orders and you want to put them into this, you can. I've provided a work order header file for you. Routings, it's basically the same as the other tables, routings, bombs, work order activity updates. This is interesting because you could send in like a report of good quantity if they want to see that change during a demo or production status. And I provide you some values there for that. Not going to get into that. You can see that in the example file and how that works. But it lets you, again, just import work order headers, work order routing steps, work order bombs, work order activities, if your customer has those for you already. What's cool about this is they don't reference any of the standard routings or bombs, so these can be totally different. The only thing needed in here is that if it references an item, then that item has to exist. Okay, so in the work order header, we reference an item that it's producing. The item has to exist on the items table here. All right. Okay, so let's start playing around a little bit with some of our attributes and extra fields in this system, right? So let's go to product rules first. This is really simple. A lot of customers ask about product rules. They say, hey, look, we've got items that run at different speeds on different resources. Can you handle that? The answer is yes. So let's look at our resources. CNCs are perfect example here to do this with. So let's go to our product rules. So our resources are here. Our items that run on our, if you look at our routings, that run on CNC are sub 1 and sub 2. Okay, so I'm just going to copy these over. So sub 1, sub 2. Let's do this, okay? Now, we could say, what was our standard? Our standard was 100 units per hour. And so we can come over here and we can say, okay, it runs for 100 units an hour on CNC 1, but this one runs for 50 units an hour on 2 and 75 on 3. And this one runs for 125 on 1, maybe 100 on 2, and let's make it 150. 150 on 3, something like that, right? So now, when these items schedule on these resources, they're going to change their speed, all right? So let's look at how that works. I'm going to save the file. Now, this is at pre-import, okay? Notice, I've got my sub 1. If I move it down to CNC 2, runs for 10 hours. CNC 3 runs for 10 hours, right? Nothing, no change there. Let's run an import. Our import's complete. So now we can look at sub 1. I'll zoom in a little bit here. If I move it up to CNC 2, runs for 20 hours. CNC 3 runs for 10 hours. Oh, sorry, CNC 1 runs for 10 hours. CNC 3 runs for 13 hours, right? So just a little really easy to import that. That's called product rules and plan it together and standard feature. All right, let's go back to our sheet. Now, let's play around with some attributes, all right? So attributes are a great way to just visualize data, but they're also a great way to calculate setup times, all right? So what I'm gonna play around with is I'm gonna pick on our sub 1s and sub 2s because they're just really easy to mess with. So let's go to our attributes, item, and sub1, sub2. Actually, create a little bit of space here. So we'll give them like 3 attributes apiece. You can do as many as you want. So let's do a length. Let's do we can just give them a color value if we want. And we can give them a family, something like that, right? So each of these are going to have the same attributes. They don't have to. So this one's 10. This one's 20. Color is, so in this case, you need some sort of value. So let's just go to our color picker. Let's say this one is, what's something that'll stand out? Is purples, right? Let's do orchid. And I'm just going to stick it here for now. And I'll pick another one that's interesting here. Let's do royal blue. Okay. And I'm also going to just have the values be the color names. It could be whatever. It could be color A, B, and you could still pass a different color in. Royal blue, perfect. And then family, we can just say A and B. Pretty simple stuff. So now, what you could do is first of all, you can pick if they show in the Gantt or not. I usually only show attributes if they have a color in the Gantt, because otherwise it gets a little crazy where you're showing all the attributes at one day. You know, in our Gantt, there's a lot of like segments, and so the more segments that you have turned on, the the more colors you're seeing. It gets kind of crazy. It's okay to do it, totally fine, but for this one, we're gonna just keep. I'll show you what this does. Let's keep that like that, and we'll come back to this in a second. So, okay, great. So we're gonna show orchid and royal blue in the Gantt at least, and then okay, hours. So what this does is this says that if I change my attribute value, I'm going to incur some amount of setup time. Okay, so in this case, sub 1 is 10, sub 2 is 20 for length. If I change that, I'm going to incur an hour of setup, right? So I can just put 1 there if I want to. If I change my color, maybe I incur 30 minutes of setup. And then if I change my family, maybe I incur another hour. Just make it easy, right? So if everything changes in this job, I'll incur 2.5 hours of setup. All right? So let's start there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another order to my sales order, just so we can play around with kind of some sequencing and some attribute colors and that sort of thing. So sales order 2, we can make it all the same. I'm just going to turn off my hot flags for now, pre-create the work orders. All right, refresh the data. And I'm just going to zoom into my job packing area once the refresh stops. Refresh started. Refresh completed. Perfect. Okay. Now, notice here, what do we got? So let's optimize this other set of jobs, my work order 3 here, onto the schedule. Okay. So let's just let's show our attribute color. Let's show our processing time, and our timing will be good. Okay. So what we've got going on here is, notice our colors are coming through as a band here, which is perfect. And look at this. We go from sub 1 to sub 2. Oops, double clicked. Actually, okay, I'll show you that the attributes came in. Color, family, length. All right. So let's see what we got here. If I zoom into this. So it went from sub 1 to sub 2. We know everything changed here, and we get 2.5 hours of setup. Pretty cool. Now watch this. If I put this sub 1 up behind here, it's going to also incur 2.5 hours of setup. Okay? If I put this blue one up in the middle, it won't incur any setup, right? Because nothing changed. It went from the same job type, same length, same color, right? Nothing changed, so it doesn't incur any setup time. If I throw this one in the middle, now it does. It goes 2, 2, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. All right, so that's pretty neat. Now, let's get even more nuanced than this. And just to reiterate, great way to send data into the system, show setup time, sequence dependent setup time. All right, so that was writing attributes. Now, we have the ability to do specific to-from tables, setup matrix, okay? So this is pretty neat. Let's do family because it's really easy. So family, attribute name is family. I'm gonna make 4 codes here. So A to A, we're gonna say there's no setup time. That was already covered. A to B, we're gonna just make this really stand out. We're gonna say, well, let's see, A to B beforehand, if we changed our family, it was just an hour. So let's do that. Let's say it's still an hour, 1 hour, right? But let's say B to B is 0. And let's say B to A is now 2 hours, okay? So what does this do? It gives us just another level of detail. Instead of saying if the family changes, we incur an hour, we can say if a family specifically goes from A to B, it's an hour. And it goes from B to A, it's 2 hours. That sort of thing, right? So let's save this. Let's run a refresh. Let's look at our data again. So remember that, so sub 1 was A and sub 2 was B. And a refresh is started. Okay, so we're going to play around with these two guys here. It's pretty easy. So we go from B to A, right? Which is 3 hours and 30 minutes, okay? But then we go from A to B. I'll make this a little bigger here so we can see it. It's just 2 hours and 30 minutes. So we get an extra hour of setup if we go from basically our blue to purple, from then purple to blue. And just to prove that, if I throw this purple one behind here, right. So purple behind there, right? And if I throw the blue one behind here, it should just be 2 hours and a half, right? Yep. So it's just dynamic, right? It just gives you the extra level of detail. I can specifically say if I change from this attribute to this attribute, I incur a specific amount of time. All right. It's pretty neat. It's kind of like an override. Okay. Last piece here with attributes are the ranges. So customers will say, hey, look, you know what? We've got like really specific constraints on some of our machines where one CNC can only do a length up to 15 inches and another CNC can do like larger ranges, right? So our attribute ranges allow us to add constraints in that way. So what we can do is we can come to our resources, we can pick on CNCs again, copy, and length. I think that was our attribute. Yep. And just to play around here, so we've got a 10 and a 20, all right? So let's go, this one goes from 0 to 5. This one goes from 5 to 15. And this one goes from 15 to 30, okay? So if we think about our jobs, sub 1 is 10. So 10 can now only schedule on CNC 2. And our 20 can only schedule on 3, okay? So now what we should see is that happen. We should see them move to the correct resources. So let's save this because we added some constraints. Now look, everything is scheduled on my CNC 1 right now because we moved them there. So we'll see how this affects it It might unschedule them because they're not going to be capable on CNC1 anymore, but let's see what happens. Right, did unschedule. They're not capable here anymore. So let's just re-optimize. Okay, so check this out now. If I click on these, and remember in Plan Together it shows you where things are capable of running. So now this job, sub 1, which has a length of 10, can only run on CNC2. If I try to move it to 1, it won't let me. It says that the length is not within the target range. If I move it to 3, same thing. Length is not within the target range. These guys can only run on C, on 3. If I try to move it to 2, can't do it. 20 is not within the target range, right? So really quick constraints, really impactful for demos. It's kind of fun to play around with. All right, let's see. Last couple pieces of this document then are just purchase orders. So, you want to be able to bring in purchase orders for your raws to show material constraints, so you can do that. Let's just do that. Let's say it's 5.1. Copy this. Actually, need to have different ID for our other raw material. Copy, paste. So they'll both come in on that date. And just for fun here, I'm going to throw in a forecast order for finished good 2, just so you can see how that works. Finished good 2, quantity, let's make 3,000 of those. And let's make it do 5. Let's make it do 515. It's fine. All right, save that. Close that. Refresh our data. Now what we're going to see here is some purchases come in. Refresh started. Refresh complete. All right, so if we look at our inventory plan and we look at our raw materials, we'll see that we've got, actually I should show, include forecast inventory calculation, yeah. So for our raws, right, we had, for our raws, we have, what do we have here? Yeah, we've got 1,000 on hand, and you kind of see the adjustments down here. And then we use some, and, oh, there we go, okay. So we have a requirement of 800 on 30. This is our start of our schedule here. Purchase comes in for 1,000. Same thing with raw 2. Gonna get rid of this screen here. Raw 2, we've got material requirement, purchases coming in, and that's all good to go. Right, and you can actually see the purchase orders too. If you look over here, you can see that they've imported into the system. All right, so let's look at our last piece here, and that's our forecast. So what did we do? We added a forecast for finished good 2, and we can check our forecasts. There's our forecast item, requirement date, 5/15, 3,000. So let's go to our Gantt, and let's generate a forecast let's generate production orders for that forecast. So remember, we have to run MRP to generate against demand. And we should see another set of orders appear here for finished good 2. And they'll probably have, if I spin this out, they'll have a order number called FO1 just for that forecast. So let's do that. All right. And here is our finished good 2 order, and there's our 2 subs for, let me order these by the order. So very cool. We can actually pull this out and see it on the Gantt. So there's our order created for our forecast. So again, forecast, sales orders, pretty much the same thing, right? Except sales orders we have more control over. Let's just go back to our sheet here and kind of summarize. Forecast orders, sales orders we have more control over. We can add more metadata around them, right? We can also pre-create the work orders to make our demos very easy. There's a lot of different colors in the system. Play around with those. There's basically job level colors, there's product level colors, there's item colors. So you'll see a lot of ways to set that up in the system. So play around with that. Purchase orders coming in, lets you play around with shortages. It's an easy way to show a shortage. Bring a purchase order in, cancel it out, see what happens. Our attributes can control setup times, can get more specific from to tables, and then can control some kind of ranges on resources for capabilities. So pretty powerful attribute stuff. Remember, standard BOMs and routings. So definitely required for the simplest of scenarios. You need, anytime you're making an item, you need your routings and your BOMs associated. Of course, item master, very important. Anytime you reference an item and plan together, it has to be an item master. Resource product rules, this is kind of an extra piece of data, but lets you control the run rate of items on different resources. And of course, our resources, just quick table created to import resources and their capabilities. Quick note about capabilities, a lot of customers, you'll have multiple capabilities per resource. This spreadsheet really only lets you select one, but you, of course, could build this out to have more capabilities per resource. And of course, metadata, just know you can always rename this field, and it will basically change the warehouse name and the plant name in the demo system to match that. I typically leave it at demo, even if I'm demoing for different customers. I just name the instance name, the customer name. And of course, the color name picker, just a quick reference to get to some web colors. Of course, you can just Google web colors too and find them. So that's the demo, that's the presentation for today. I hope you find this template useful. Of course, if you have any feedback or comments, leave them below the video. And yeah, happy demoing. Thanks a lot.